I didn't choose the ocean. The ocean chose me on a morning when the horizon looked like a seam sewn badly, and the wind kept worrying at it as if it meant to pull the world apart. I had come to Miramar Bay for one reason only: to end the war between my lungs and water, to step into the same salt that took my brother Daniel and not come out in pieces. The town was small and sun-drunk, a crescent of weathered docks and gull-bent roofs, a place where the skin on fishermen's hands had more stories than any guidebook. I found a cheap room above a bakery and a dive school that smelled of neoprene and coffee, and told the instructor, Anna, freckles, dark hair stuffed into a faded cap, that I wanted the fast track. She gave me the long stare instructors reserve for people running from something and said, "Fast is the worst way to meet the sea." Still, she took me out the next day, because the water was glass and the current behaved and I looked like I might disappear if left alone. I told her nothing about Daniel. I told her nothing about the autumn 5 years before, when a storm wrenched our father's boat sideways and swallowed the man I'd hero-worshipped since forever. I didn't tell her how grief had turned to superstition, how any body of water larger than a bathtub made my heart gallop so hard it hurt. I signed forms, watched safety videos, nodded at the right moments. When she clipped a regulator into my hands and said, "This will be your voice down there," it sounded like a dare. We motored out beyond the breakwater, past a scatter of dinghies and a long line of pelicans stitched to the surface. The world smelled like salt and sunblock. I breathed through the regulator at the surface, trying to believe in the calm logic of gears and hoses. "Hand on the line, slow descent, look at me, not your fear," Anna said, warm and steady. I nodded too eagerly and, the second the ocean pressed a cool palm over my head, the old war began. Pressure. Noise. A sudden chorus of bubble rush that my body read as panic. I saw nothing but blue, then pieces of sun spiking the surface. My chest clamped, that ancient, animal clamp, and my brain shouted up a flood of useless commands: kick, surface, run. I fumbled the line, lost it, spun in a half-slow-motion tumble that sent my exhale into a ribbon of silver coins. Anna's hand tried to find mine. I pulled away, eyes wide, then wider. The past shoved into the present. Daniel's orange jacket vanishing against a sheet of slate water, my mother's voice turning into a small, broken animal in the kitchen. My regulator felt wrong in my mouth, too large and not enough, both at once. I ripped it out without meaning to and swallowed a slap of brine that burned like alcohol. I would have bolted and blacked out if not for the sound that cut through the water like a bell, a bright, glassy clicking, a sound I felt more than heard, a pulse touching the ribs of the sea. At first I thought I'd imagined it. Then he appeared out of the blue as if the ocean had decided to make a miracle, a dolphin, skin slate and silver, eyed dark and curious. He approached with the deliberate calm of a surgeon, turned so close I could see the subtle pink at his blowhole rim, and loitered beside my shoulder with a stillness I didn't know dolphins possessed. His presence slotted me back into my body. Some ridiculous part of me thought, "Don't you dare drown in front of someone this beautiful." Anna pressed the regulator to my lips and made the okay sign. I shook, gulped, coughed bubbles, then bit down and took a shuddering breath. The dolphin, later I'd learn locals called him Lucas, kept station like a guardian, adjusting his position as I fumbled hand over hand back to the line, as Anna's fingers curled around my forearm and guided me up. We breached into sun and air that felt too sharp and too kind. I spat the regulator and sobbed a sound full of anger at myself. Anna didn't say "I told you so." She hauled me over the gunwale, yanked off my mask, pressed a towel to my shaking face, and let me be a mess in peace. "Who was that?" I asked eventually, voice splintered. She was already looking out over the side. Lucas surfaced, rolled an eye toward us, and did a soft half-chuff of air, as if to say, "You're noisy." "He's been around this bay for years," Anna said. "Sometimes alone, sometimes with a pod. He's curious. And apparently he has excellent timing." On the boat ride back, Miramar Bay felt different, as if the water itself had changed not at the chemical level but the human one. My palms still stung from clenching the rope. Shame threaded itself through relief, the particular shame of surviving messily. At the dock, an older man with a sun-carved face, Elias, everyone seemed to know him, leaned on a crate and shook his head like he'd seen it all, which he probably had. "You got lucky," he said. "Luck wears a fin if you're blessed." I slept badly, a kaleidoscope of clicks in my ears, and woke with the imprint of a smooth eye in my mind. I told myself I wouldn't go back out. I went back out. The second day, Anna made me sit on the beach first and breathe through the regulator while waves frothed in and out like lungs. She taught me to read the swell, to respect rhythm instead of fearing it. You can't bargain with the sea, she said. You can only learn to move with it. Out past the pier we slipped in again, me narrating my own breathing like a child counting steps in the dark. We stayed shallow. We hovered over eelgrass that waved like a wicker carpet, watched a school of anchovies turn as one organism, an ephemeral silver ribbon that tied the day together. And then, as if we'd rung a bell only he could hear, Lucas arrived. He didn't perform. He didn't rocket or leap. He simply came alongside with an economy of motion that made every human thing seem clumsy. He traced a loose oval around us, slid beneath me, and turned his belly skyward as if to say, "Look, nothing up my sleeve, nothing hidden." When I extended a flat palm, he did not touch it, and I understood that consent belonged in the water as on land. My fear receded to the reef's edge, where it sulked and watched while something quieter took its place. When we surfaced, I was grinning into salt. "He likes you," Anna said. "He likes you because you stopped trying to control him," Elias added from the dock later, with a grin that contained too many teeth to be kind and yet somehow was. In the days that followed, a pattern knitted itself out of coincidence and choice. Early mornings on flat water. Breath and slow descent. The sound of my own bubbles. The cool compression of depth. A scatter of shadows like handprints on the sand. And then, most days, Lucas. Sometimes he brought companions, two juveniles brash as teenagers, a rotund auntie with healed rake marks on her flank. Sometimes he came alone and kept me company the way you keep a grieving friend company. Present, undemanding, funny when it helped. On land, I found myself saying his name like a small prayer. I researched at night. Echolocation clicks up to 150 kHz, complex social structures, matrilineal pods, cooperative hunting, cultural transmission of behaviors like sponge carrying. "You're falling in love with a dolphin," my mother said over the phone, half amused, half wary. "I'm letting the ocean be something other than a grave," I said, and we both went quiet with that truth. The day the sea tested me, it dressed like spring and came as a kindness until it wasn't. A squall bloomed fast, the kind that blooms like bruises. One moment blue, the next a smear of black on the horizon and a wind that felt like it had teeth. Tour boats turned for harbour. A rental skiff full of tourists from somewhere inland laughed a little too loudly over the chop. I was doing a short training dive with Anna in the lee of a kelp bed when the air went cold in that particular way air does before the sky decides to empty a bucket. We were already ascending when the first hard drops hit, and by the time we cleared the kelp, the skiff had swung sideways on a wave and dumped 3 people into the water like beans from a torn sack. The driver panicked and gunned the engine, and the prop churned dangerously near a woman's flailing legs. Anna blew her whistle and shouted, clear and fierce. I threw myself over the side before my terror could make a case. The water was suddenly all texture and noise, rain like shot, wind shredding the surface into 1,000 directions. I got a hand on the woman, whose eyes were cartoon-wide with a terror I recognized too well. Float, I barked, because a command can be a comfort when the world breaks. Lean back. I've got you. The man beside her was coughing, the third clinging white-knuckled to the skiff's rail, trying to haul himself in sideways in a way that made it less likely. I got the woman to the stern. Anna maneuvered the boat like it was part of her body, shouted at the driver to kill the engine, then to hand me the lifeline. The line slapped water, I grabbed it, looped it around the woman's chest, and together we levered her in. I turned to the coughing man. He panicked at the first touch like a trapped animal and shoved me under without meaning to. 4-1 savage beat. I was back in that long-ago grey November, the water a liar and a judge. I saw Daniel's face half-turned, hair plastered to his skull. An electric flood of adrenaline lit my limbs. Then the ocean offered a different memory. A ribbon of silver bubbles, a bright clicking, an eye like a quarter moon. Lucas surged between us and the boat with an assertive grace that made space where none existed. He presented his flank to the man. The man grabbed reflexively. Lucas towed, not fast, not hard, just enough, a precise, irresistible invitation. The third tourist slipped, Anna swore, the skiff lurched. I found my feet where feet don't belong, found my voice where I'd dropped it years before, and shouted until the man's terror narrowed down to the single task of following. We got all three aboard. The storm dimpled the sea with fresh anger. Thunder thudded like an old heart. Lucas rolled, showed half his face, then ghosted under again as if embarrassed to be caught helping. I collapsed against the gunwale and laughed the laughter that comes when sobbing would take too much time. "You okay?" Anna asked, a question with 1,000 possible answers. "He saved us twice," I said, meaning Lucas and the ocean both, which made 0 sense and all the sense in the world. News moves fast in small towns. By evening, everyone at Marina Cafe had a version, and none of them were entirely wrong. Elias thumped my back with a palm like driftwood and set down a plastic basket of churros I hadn't ordered. "To luck," he said. "And to the friends we don't deserve." But kindness has a twin named cost, and the ocean keeps its accounts with a courtliness that isn't always gentle. 2 days after the storm, the harbor smelled wrong, not fish and diesel and brine, but something metallic and faintly sour, like rain on hot wire. Out past the point, gulls wheeled in agitated spirals. The radio squawked with a notice about a drifting tangle of illegal gillnet off the South Reef. "Bastards," Anna muttered, jaw set. "We've told them 100 times." Nets meant for open water sometimes got cut loose by cowards who didn't want to be caught with evidence. The sea turned those nets into ghosts that killed without intent or end. We took the boat out, a coil of rope and bolt cutters under the seat, a serrated knife strapped to my calf. The reef rose like a green breath under us, the water so clear it was a lie. Clarity has nothing to do with safety. We spotted the net by its unholy signature. A slack, ugly wall undulating just below the surface like a ruined window, the floats half submerged in a way that said weight where weight shouldn't be. And then I saw it, a shape pinned in the mesh, thrashing with decreasing energy. Dolphin. My mind rejected the fact before it could admit the details. The grey curve of flank, the tail lashing, the eye too bright, and then too tired. I didn't say Lucas's name because saying a name can break a person in ways you don't recover from. "In," Anna said, as if I were already moving, which I was. The water embraced and resisted. The net was worse up close, its fibers slick with algae, its knots cruel. The dolphin, Lucas, it was Lucas, had one pectoral fin twisted into the mesh and a loop tight across his rostrum. The more he struggled, the tighter the net bit, like bad memory. I made myself small inside my panic. Knife. Rope. Angle. Air. "Easy," I said, absurdly, as if the word could travel through water and calm a wild heart. His eye rolled toward me. There was recognition in it, or I painted it there because I needed it. Either way, it steadied me. I cut the first strand. It snapped with a vibration that went up my arm. Anna hovered above with a float and a calm that had carried 100 panicked divers to the surface. A juvenile dolphin circled fast, clicking hard, a scattershot X-ray that felt like it was mapping my bones. I cut another strand, and another. My hands shook so hard the knife juddered against the mesh. Lucas stilled, as if some older wisdom had moved into him with the cold. I measured breaths. I did the math of air to effort and swam back up twice to reset the ledger. On the third dive I slid my fingers under the loop at his rostrum and realized with a bolt of nauseated clarity that the line had begun to cut into living flesh. Rage is a hot, stupid thing. This was its opposite, a cold, precise flame. "Hold," I said, to him or myself or God, and eased the knife under the loop so I wouldn't flay what I meant to free. The blade caught, I shifted, the line bit, I shifted again, the sea leaned in to watch. Somewhere above us Anna's hand hovered with the float like a blessing. The loop gave with a terrible reluctance, then parted. Lucas convulsed. My mask flooded. I lost the knife and found it again by sheer insulted stubbornness. The net still had his fin. My lungs began to rattle their cages. I cut 3 more strands, 4, found the knot, cursed it in the language grief had taught me, and pared it down to fear, then sliced the fear open with the same blade. Sudden slack. He twisted free. For a heartbeat I thought he'd bolt and crash into me by accident and break my ribs the way a wave can when it isn't trying to. Instead he hesitated, exactly as he had the first day I met him, turned that keen eye on me, and made a single, deliberate, impossibly gentle pass along my arm from elbow to wrist, as if the ocean were blessing my pulse for its trouble. Then he was gone, up and out, a clean silver flash that tore the water and stitched it back together as if seams were always optional. I surfaced into sky and noise I hadn't known I was missing. The other dolphin shot past like laughter. Anna whooped a wordless sound that peeled something old off my bones. I lay back and floated, the net a dark rug beside me, the knife handle bumping my thigh like a dog who refuses to go home without you. Back on the boat I cried an ugly cry and didn't apologize for it. We hauled the net aboard with grunts and curses. Elias met us at the dock with a hook and a prayer. The harbour master took photos that he promised would wind up in the right inboxes this time. He looked like a man who'd sworn that before and hated the taste of the lie. Word spread like tide. Kids came down with markers and drew dolphins on cardboard with speech bubbles that said things too simple to argue with, "Don't kill us." The cafe put up a jar that said "No ghost nets." Anna called a friend at a small conservation non-profit. By nightfall they had a link, by morning a fund, by week's end a promise from the council to put teeth into old regulations that had been all gums. If a story can save a life, it's because it convinces people their choices add up to something bigger than their fear of change. Lucas came by the pier 2 mornings later when the light was a clean sheet hung out to dry. He surfaced where I could see him and exhaled a chuff so soft it sounded like a secret. I sat on the edge with my bare feet in the water, toes whitening with chill, and told him out loud what I hadn't said to any human, that when Daniel died, I'd started measuring time not in months or years but in distances from risk. That I had shrunk the world to what I thought I could control. That meeting him had widened it again, not into recklessness but into something like courage. He tilted his head, as if he liked the vibration of my voice through the water. I can't say he understood, but I understood me in a way I hadn't since loss turned me to smoke. The summer unraveled in good ways. I finished my certification. I learned to love the effortless geometry of neutral buoyancy, the way the body hangs between gravity and sky. I volunteered with the new net recovery crew. We found 2 more tangles and hauled them out like rotten teeth. The tourists who came on weekends bought hats that said "Heroes Among Us" with a little dolphin silhouette, and for once the commodification of a feeling didn't disgust me because the hats paid for floats and knives and fuel. I started writing the stories down, dry facts at first, then the other kind, the kind that name an eye and a breath and the places a human hand shakes before it steadies. Sometimes at dusk I'd sit on the rocks where Miramar Bay shrugged into ocean and watch for fins. Sometimes they came. Sometimes they didn't. That's the other thing the sea taught me. Love that's real doesn't come when called, it comes when it wants and is glorious anyway. On the last warm evening before autumn put a bite in the air, I swam at sunset without a tank, just mask and fins, the water a copper bowl I poured myself into. The world narrowed to sound and light and the clean line of my body through something older than any promise I could make. When Lucas slid alongside, my heart didn't leap like prey. It steadied like a boat coming even with a dock. We swam shoulder to shoulder for a long while, him surfacing every couple minutes, me lifting for air more often, the two of us caught in the same net of surface and breath. I reached a flat hand toward him. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. The ocean itself closed the space between us, and for once I didn't think of what it had taken. I thought of what it kept giving and kept giving and kept giving, so long as I let it. Somewhere behind us, on land, a bell rang the hour. Somewhere ahead, life would again be complicated, full of work and loss and small victories. But that night, the seam of the horizon held. No wind tried to tease it apart. I kicked, he glided, and when we turned toward shore together, I felt it. The click of something inside me that had been out of joint since the day we lost Daniel, setting quietly back into place. I did not thank the ocean out loud. I did not thank Lucas with human words. I just swam easier, and when my feet found sand, I stood up and walked toward the lights of Miramar Bay, brine on my skin like a benediction, the kind of salt that doesn't sting but heals. That night, after the net was hauled away and the harbor lay quiet again, I walked the length of the pier to where the bay opens into real ocean. The moon had not yet risen, and the water wore a blackness that wasn't threatening anymore, just honest. I sat with my bare feet dangling above the slow, patient slap of swell, and I thought about the shape grief had taken in me, First a locked room, then a tight fist, then a habit, and, because of a fin with a name, finally something I could lay down. I whispered Daniel's name into the dark as if it were a shell I could put back where I found it. The sound came back softer. I didn't try to catch it. The next morning the town gathered in a way towns do when something has brushed them close enough to wake them up. The council set up a folding table in front of the old cannery and handed out microphones that squealed and then settled. A woman from the non-profit spoke about gear buyback programs and enforcement teeth that weren't just gums. A fisherman with hands like rope said he'd help chart the places nets drifted to die so we could hunt them on purpose, not by accident. I stood in the shade of a palm Anna always claimed was homesick and told the true part of the story that mattered. That help came because we asked for it and because something wild chose us back. I didn't say Lucas's name into the mic. I held it, a private vow. Not all days stayed golden. The sea has moods and so do people. Some mornings the water turned to hammered steel and the wind came sideways and every task took twice the muscle. Some afternoons tourists fed chips to gulls and left wrappers where tide could find them. I learned the art of steady anger, not the kind that eats you, but the kind you can cook into work. We set out more marker buoys. We mapped underwater snag points with the careful handwriting of sonar. I started a simple website, no hearts, no glitter, just a place to report a ghost net or donate for knives and fuel. The jar at the cafe grew heavy with coin. Elias claimed his coffee tasted better for it. One evening Anna put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Tomorrow, glass calm and a north light. Bioluminescence is running. Want to see what the water looks like when the stars come from below?" We went out after the sun slipped, just far enough that the town's lights turned to a necklace thrown carelessly on the shore. I slid in with my mask and fins and watched the dark explode into tiny, electric blues wherever I moved. Every kick wrote a line. Every exhale minted coins that drifted and blinked out. And then a larger script flowed beside mine, a calligraphy of curves that needed no translation. Lucas, drawing light with his body like a brush. He spun a slow spiral that made galaxies of the dinoflagellates, circled me until my arms were a Milky Way, then knifed straight up and broke the surface so clean the stars above seemed to ring. I laughed into my snorkel, the sound turning ridiculous and perfect. When he slid back down, he hovered at my shoulder, and for one arrogant minute I believed I could read joy in another species. Maybe I only read my own reflected back at me. It was enough. We found another net 2 days later, but it held only seaweed and a sadness we cut free before it learned to grab. The non-profit sent down a film student with a camera in a housing like a small spaceship. She swam like she'd been made in water, and when we surfaced after an hour of mapping, she pushed her mask up and said, breathless, "People need to see this, not just the bad, the good too. They don't know how close the miracles are." The video went up the following week. It wasn't slick, it didn't need to be. It showed a hand and a fin sharing the same frame without either being the subject, and a town in the background doing its little part. The link traveled the strange routes hope travels. A donor in another time zone paid for 4 more marker buoys. A classroom in Nebraska, landlocked and earnest, sent a package of hand-drawn dolphins with note card vows to throw away less plastic. The world is bigger than the maps we carry in our pockets. On a Sunday that smelled like bread and brine, my mother came to Miramar for the first time since Daniel's funeral. She stood at the end of the pier with a windbreaker zipped too high and watched the water like it might confess something if she stared hard enough. "It's the same," she said. And it isn't. We didn't talk about the worst day. We walked past the cafe and bought coffee and shared a pastry with sugar you could see. I showed her the marker board where kids had written "I saw a fin." And I think I heard them sing in chalk that the sea would eventually lick clean. We sat side by side and let silence do its best work. When Lucas surfaced once, 40 yards out, she reached for my hand and squeezed without looking at me. "Your father would have loved that," she said. It didn't undo all the years. It didn't need to. It stitched one small seam. The season leaned toward fall. Pelicans practiced the heavy grace of migration. The water sharpened in a way that made colors draw. On my last long swim before the first real storm of autumn, I followed the contour of the reef as if it could teach me how to live along an edge without falling. A seal watched me with the legal skepticism of a harbor cop. A cormorant arrowed past, slick and smug. And then Lucas came, not from behind or ahead but from below, rising into my field of view like a thought I'd been trying to catch for years. We matched pace without trying. He veered, I veered. He paused, I floated. At one point he turned sideways and offered me that keen, coin-dark eye, and the world telescoped to a simple truth. Fear had not left me, it had learned to sit quietly in the corner while I did what I loved anyway. When we turned toward shore, the tide took us in with a gentleness that felt intentional. The beach held the day's last families folding chairs, a dog who believed the ocean was a game always about to be won, a boy digging a hole big enough for his hopes. I stood up in the shallows and pushed my mask to my hair. Lucas lingered until a small wave dressed my legs in lace, then he tilted his head in that way he had, which I had learned meant nothing more nor less than goodbye for now, and vanished into the ordinary miracle of depth. Back at the dive shop, Anna handed me a laminated card with my certification printed on it and a grin that showed her freckle constellation. "You earned this," she said. "Twice." Elias wandered over with 3 paper cups of something sweet and celebratory that he refused to name. "To the girl who listens," he said. "And to the sea that sometimes answers." We drank. We laughed. We watched a pair of kids take turns jumping from the low pier, come up sputtering and triumphant, and shout to no one and everyone, "Did you see me?" That night, in my small room above the bakery where heat rises and dreams still smell like cinnamon, I wrote Daniel a letter I would never send. I told him about the reef and the light that blooms when you move the right way. I told him about a dolphin who held his nerve when I lost mine and about a town that decided to be braver than its habits. I promised to keep knives sharp and lines ready, to teach anyone who asked what ghost net means, to pick up what the tide forgets. I said I loved him. I said I would keep swimming. When I finished, I didn't fold the paper into a bottle or set fire to it for drama. I slid it under the leg of the wobbly table and felt the balance of the room settle. Months from now, a storm will come that scares us like the first one did and we'll be ready sooner. Years from now, a kid who saw that film will show up with a cheap mask and a fierce heart and ask to help, and I will say yes and hand them a rope and the story that goes with it. Some mornings I won't see a fin at all. Some evenings I'll see 3 and pretend not to count them like wishes. I will keep the jar at the cafe labeled with the truth, no ghost nets, and I will keep a spare knife strapped to my calf. I will keep learning the grammar of current and the syntax of swell and the way love translates between species without words. And on some future summer dusk when the bay goes quiet and the horizon remembers how to be sewn shut, I will slip into water I don't have to forgive anymore. If Lucas comes, we'll draw our bright lines together until the sea looks starred from the inside. If he doesn't, I'll still move through the dark like someone who knows the way home. Either way, when my feet find sand, I'll stand and breathe and carry the ocean with me in the only place that matters. In a heart that finally learned how to make room for tide.